calls in this segment. We'll take some calls. We'll go back and pick up the calls here in a few minutes that came in the last segment. If you guys can hold on, Paul and Johnny, hold on, talk about the debt ceiling, fiscal cliff issues. I want to take your calls in this segment on a couple of things. One is these pot initiatives that were passed in Colorado and Washington. The interesting thing about them is to see what the liberals are doing with the fact that these states, by initiative, the people establishing these laws, and a law that's established by initiative has just as much force as a law passed by the legislature, that Colorado and Washington have legalized recreational marijuana. Now, I've been very clear on this. We've talked about the fact that recreational marijuana rots your brain. It ought to be contrary to public policy. Teens that start using marijuana in their teens, they've got solid research now that it diminishes their IQ permanently. They lose IQ points. They never can get back. And as they mature, as they get older, they have more problems with memory and with attention. So, I mean, pot rots your brain. No question about it. But the people of these states have passed a law indicating that they want to have recreational use. And this conflicts with federal law. Federal law says marijuana is illegal. You can go to federal prison if you traffic in marijuana. So I want to get to a couple of sound bites on that. But first of all, Rob, why don't we grab clip number 13? Why don't we jump down there? I'm going to shift gears on you a little bit. This is Bob Woodward, clip 13. And he was talking confidentially, as a confidential document that he came across about what President Obama was willing to do, apparently, when he was talking with Speaker Boehner last year for their $4 trillion grand bargain. And here is what, according to Bob Woodward, Obama was willing to do at that time. Let's listen.
This is the confidential last offer the White House made last year to Speaker Boehner to try to reach this $4 trillion grand bargain. And it's long and it's tedious and it's got budget jargon in it. But what it shows is a willingness to cut all kinds of things like TRICARE, which is the sacred health insurance program for the military, for military retirees, to cut Social Security, to cut Medicare. And there's some lines in there about we want to get tax rates down, not only for individuals, but for businesses. Some in the White House were willing to go quite far. In a sense, this is the starting point, and I guess you're going to put it up on your website so the budget wonks can
see it.
Parse through it.
So Bob Woodward saying, hey, President Obama last year was willing to get tax rates down. He was going to cut Social Security. He was going to cut Medicare. He was going to cut TRICARE. And that was then. He was caught on an open mic indicating that he's not quite as amenable to compromise as maybe he sounded. Let's listen.
I remember at one point in the negotiations, one of Boehner's staff people pipes up and says, "You don't understand, Mr. President. We've lost on, on health care. We've lost on the EPA. We've given that up. We've got to have something to sell to our caucus." And I said to them, let me tell you something. I spent a year and a half getting health care passed. I had to take that issue across the country, and I paid significant political costs to get it done. The notion that I'm going to let you guys undo that in a 6-month spending bill? I said, you want to repeal health care? Go at it. We'll have that debate. But you're not going to be able to do that by nickel and diming me in the budget. You think we're stupid?
No, but I think President Obama thinks the GOP is stupid. He's playing them for chumps right now. Here's David Axelrod, clip 15. Now, remember, this is a fairly close election. I mean, it was, I don't know, what was it, 51 to 49, 51 and a half to 48 and a half, something like that. And here's the way David Axelrod and the Democrats are interpreting the election results.
It is obvious that we can't resolve the challenge here simply by cutting the budget. We've cut by $1 trillion. There are more cuts to be made, but you need new revenues, and every objective person who's looked at this agrees on that. So the question is, where is that revenue going to come from? The president believes it's more equitable to get that from the wealthiest Americans who have done very well and frankly don't need those tax cuts. and who benefited disproportionately from the tax cuts in the last decade. And most Americans agree with that.
You know, it's amazing to me. You know, the hubris and the arrogance of these guys thinking that they can decide how much of a person's own money they ought to be able to keep. Where they think they can decide, no, you have enough money. You don't need any more money. That's for me to decide. It's not for you to decide. That's for me to decide whether you have enough money at your disposal. So they're interpreting the results of the election as kind of a mandate to raise taxes on the wealthy. And do not forget, if you confiscated every dollar of the 400 wealthiest people in America, you took everything they own, every dime they own, you confiscated all of their wealth, so now they were not in a position to generate any more wealth. All their money is gone. All their assets are gone. You'd have $1.3 trillion. That would not be enough to cover the deficit for one single solitary year, and then their money is gone. I mean, the thought that you can tax the wealthy and we can get out of this ditch we're in, it's just ludicrous. Only an economic moron would believe that that is going to solve the problem. Now, I want to play a couple of quick sound bites, and we'll go to the phones, 888-589-8840. Let's go back to clip 11, talking about this marijuana thing. And what I want you to hear on both these clips, the perspective that these dope heads have on the 10th Amendment and the federal government. Now, all of a sudden, these dope heads, these potheads, they're the biggest believers in the 10th Amendment and the Constitution you ever heard of in your life. They sound like the Tea Party. They want the federal government to keep their noses out of our business. Let's listen.
It's not simply about drug legalization, but it's about do the states have the right to set certain policies that affect their residents, or do they always have to kind of give over to whatever the federal government says?
That sounded like the Tea Party. 10th Amendment, you got no right to tell us what to do. Here's Governor Moonbeam, another quote from Jerry Brown talking to Candy Crowley about the 10th Amendment. He sounds like a Tea Partier.
Well, I would say this. It's time for the Justice Department to recognize the sovereignty of the states. And California has a medicinal marijuana law. Other states have passed some other measures.
Well, recreational is in Colorado and Washington State.
We have a laboratory of democracy. We don't always agree with all states. Some states have capital punishment. Some states don't. Some now have legalized marijuana, small amounts for recreational use. Many states have legalized medicinal marijuana. I believe the President and the Department of Justice ought to respect the will of these separate states.
And not, so in other words, no prosecution, no federal prosecution, since it is a federal drug law, of those who have legalized small amounts of marijuana.
I think the federal law can maintain, but it shouldn't try to nullify reasonable state measures. I'm not saying the state can do anything they want, but the measures that have been adopted so far have been after vigorous debate. In fact, there was a marijuana legalization in California, and it was rejected. It's been rejected in other states. So we are capable of self-government. We don't need some federal gendarme to come in and tell us what to do. I believe comity toward the states, that's a decent respect, ought to govern the policy, and that means change the policy now.
Can you believe that? I mean, that guy sounds like a 10th Amendment Tea Partier. We can handle our own affairs. We ought to be able to make up our own mind. This is all about self-governance. The federal government ought to stay out of our business, get out of our kitchen, get up on out of our grill. Because the 10th Amendment, the Constitution says we've got the right to make these decisions for ourselves. So the dope heads, the potheads, all of a sudden the biggest believers in the 10th Amendment you ever met in your entire life. And they're saying federal law, if it conflicts with that, it's nullified. Doesn't count. If federal law conflicts with our right to self-governance, the federal law is to be set aside. Federal government has to respect state sovereignty. The same stuff that the Tea Partiers have been saying. Well, let's grab a couple of quick phone calls for the end of the program. Let's go to Paul, Wilmington, North Carolina. Paul, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hi, Brian. Thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
Listening to all of this stuff that's going back and forth, and the Republicans that feel that they've got to pander it. I mean, they're not learning anything from the election itself. Mitt Romney came out not with a hard line, but saying how nice Obama was, and instead of pointing out the failures, like with GM when he said he saved the auto industry, that's an absolute lie. You got to call them out. You got to speak the truth, and there's a nice way you can do it. But you have to speak the truth. And he seemed to soften after that first debate where he was it's pathetic. And we don't have leadership in the House. I do hope that I would like to see Paul Ryan become the Speaker of the House, and hopefully have somebody that would be more fiscally responsible.
Yeah. Well, I certainly agree with you, and I think a lot of people would. It's just kind of an absence of muscular leadership on the part of the House. Remember, they control the purse strings. President Obama can't spend $1 implementing Obamacare if the House doesn't appropriate it. They can throw a monkey wrench into the transmission and stop this thing before it goes over the cliff. The question is, do they have the political will to do it? All right, thanks, Paul. Let's grab one last call. Let's go to Johnny in Texas. Johnny, last call of the day. What's on your mind, my friend?
Hello, Brian.
Hey.
I do believe the House is going to vote to raise the debt ceiling.
Think they should?
Excuse me?
Do you think they should?
No, I don't think they should at all, but I think they will.
Yeah.
There's not enough fiscal conservatives in the House to outweigh the Republican ruling class.
Well, and I think I agree with you, Johnny. It's kind of sad but true. I think, and everybody knows the place is going to fall in on our heads. Even the Republicans admit that. This is unsustainable. We're going off the cliff. Something's got to be done. But they're not willing to make the hard changes and decisions to prevent the roof from falling in on our heads. So everybody, I think, now is just trying to position themselves, try to get in a position where they can blame the other guy when the roof collapses on our heads. Now may the God of peace himself sanctify you completely, and may your whole spirit and soul and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. He who calls you is faithful. He will surely do it. Bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap. Never forget, we are fighting a winnable war. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of American Family Association or American Family Radio.